know, the Game Developers Conference is an annual conference for game developers. It's really big. It's in San Francisco, and the price for the tickets are pretty expensive. But if you apply to be a conference associate, then you get to go there for free, and you actually get paid. So you have to do so I did it last year. You have to do a minimum of 25 to 28 hours. You get paid for the hours that you do, and then you get to go to any workshops, any sessions that you want. So if you guys are interested in that, I would highly recommend that you apply to be a conference associate. It's super fun. You get to hang out with a bunch of other conference associates and improve your network. It's a really great networking opportunity. So are there any questions about that? Yes?
Use Google EGC or GDC.
Yeah. Google GDC Conference Associate or GDCCA. The application link should be the first one. I think it goes until early December, but I would not take my word on it, so check that out.
And so obviously you still have to pay for your transportation there and back,
yes.
And also housing, I believe.
You do have, yeah. Oh yeah. You have to pay for housing for 1 week, and you have to pay for your flights, but you get the ticket to GDC for free. And it's not just an Expo pass, it's everything pass, except it does not include the VR GDC experience, which they split up last year. But other than that, it's really amazing, and definitely apply if you're interested.
Yeah, GDC is a full week, and it's a week before, or it's not during spring break, sadly. It's a week after spring break for us, which sucks. But
I think it's before, actually.
Okay, it's one of those. You can look it up.
Yeah, Blender workshop?
Yeah, Kevin, you want to talk about it? Okay, well, we're having a Blender workshop this Sunday. Kevin's going to run it. He's eating chicken. But, yeah, so if you want to learn Blender, you definitely want to use a mouse and numpad. Numpad for the shortcuts, mouse to move around nicely. Trackpad is not very easy in Blender.
Mouse more so than numpad, because the numpad can be simulated elsewhere.
And so Blender, if you don't know, it's 3D modeling. It's free, so it's pretty good stuff.
Is that this Sunday? Oh.
Yeah, that's this Sunday.
Okay. Is that going to be on the Facebook page?
Yeah, I don't think it is right now.
Yeah, I don't think there's an event yet.
Yeah, we should have done that. But
Oh, sorry.
But the details are there.
any questions? Any other questions? Oh yeah, and so next Thursday we're gonna have another dev night. But this dev night's gonna be a little special. It's also gonna be a little bit of a workshop. We're gonna have some people in the CS department who are researching some new tracking technology using sound. So they're calling it, I don't want to mispronounce that, but it says Howley, something like that. And so it's tracking technology, positional tracking, using just sound waves, like low frequency so you can't hear it. And it can be emitted using any speaker, so like off-the-shelf basic speaker, and can be heard using any microphone. So specifically, they're demoing it with a phone. And so they'll be here demoing it. They have the SDK that we can use for Unity and in Java and in C, I believe. And so that'll be cool. Come out, check that out, and then you can make something with some technology that the industry doesn't even have yet. And then if you haven't heard about it, the Hoff Institute, you definitely haven't heard about it, because last night was whenever it was announced. But it's a brand new game design development vocational school. It's through the Hoff Institute, which is the House of Tutors. That's what it used to be called. It's just in West Campus, and this is for people who probably aren't students at UT, because it's a lot of work on its own. But it's like a nightly, I think it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like a night study program where you're going to be actually making a game. And so the basic idea is to give people real-world experience in game development. Because through UT, sure, we learn all the programming and the art and all these other things, all the different disciplines, but actually learning to work for a client and do something that's not necessarily your own artistic vision, that's a whole nother thing. And it's basically, if you've heard of the Dennis Sam's Gaming Academy, that's the thing that UT did. I think they're still working on that. I don't know if it's, no?
It's done.
Okay. Well, they made a couple games, and this is that same sort of thing. And there's I think there's 3 teachers right now that they have. I know two of them. One of them is Sarah Abraham, who many of you have probably taken a class from. She teaches here doing game tech and graphics, and then there's a level designer and an artist, and they'll be basically helping people make a game for a client, an actual game studio. And so if you know people who would be interested in this, it's coming up soon, very soon, this January through August, so they need applications now. So if you know anyone who'd be interested in this sort of thing, who maybe are trying to get into the game industry but don't have the resume to actually put their foot in the door, then check this out. Here's the website. And you can just probably Google Hoff Institute Game Design, and you'll find it there. And then we've got a little feedback request form because we're planning our next semester right now. Here's a link to it. It's pretty long, but it'll help us a lot trying to figure out what exactly you all would like us to do. What exactly we need to do to make UT better for game development. And yeah. Then we got membership dues. We got Jake here, right over there. If you haven't paid your $15 dues yet, hit him up. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to start the speaker panel now, so if I could have my speakers come up. This is going to be pretty informal. I'm going to ask them a few questions, and then after that we'll open it up to you guys, so you can ask them any questions that you have. And just to get a sense of the room, how many programmers do we have here? All right, and then art design, and then writing. Awesome, and audio. Okay, cool. Anything else I missed? Yeah, okay, cool. So we have people from all across. Wow, this is exciting. This is the first panel I've ever asked questions for. So if we could just go down the line and if you guys could introduce yourselves, that would be great.
Hi everyone, my name is MJ. I run a studio here in Austin called Astire Games. We do a variety of work ranging from mobile to VR to PC. And we do work for hire, so we have clients and we do projects for them. And we also run an internship program, so we take students and we do projects with students, usually for mobile. And then I also teach part-time out at the Art Institute. I teach game design and gameplay scripting.
Also, we're going to display all of their contact information after the panel, so if you guys want to reach out to them that way, you can do that.
Hi, I'm Jeff McMillen. I'm a freelance music composer and sound designer who's been working in games for probably about 5 years now. There's a few release titles that are out there, and one or two more that are on the way. Been doing stuff for VR now for probably, of those 5 years, I'd say about 3 of them. Participated in a number of game jams all throughout that time. And some of those game jam, some of those projects that I worked on through game jams actually led to contract gigs further on down the line. So yeah, just been working on that for quite a while, and yeah, that's about it.
Hi, I'm Elena. I have a small VR AR. We focus on VR AR application. Company called Nova Kitten Productions. I'm also still a student here. I'm an RTF student, and so kind of busy balancing both of those things. But it's been a lot of fun, and yeah, it's been going really well. And yeah, and we focus on VR because it's super fun, and I've been doing it for about 1.5 years now. So.
I'm Andrew. I'm a programmer at a small studio here called Airship Syndicate. We just shipped a game called Battle Chasers, and before that I was an engine programmer at what's that game? Star Citizen, and I've done various roles from QA, engine programming, and gameplay programming. Yeah.
So how would you say that you went from like college or high school experience and how you navigated your path to where you are now?
Should we just go down?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So for me, I kind of went back and forth. I originally graduated with a computer science degree, and my first job was just doing programming. I worked for a company that did online training software, and so I was actually doing ActionScript because they did everything that was Flash applications back then. Just helping it. So that was my first job right out of college, and I didn't really know that game development was really an option for a career. But I wasn't really happy just working at a software development company, so I went back to school who go to grad school, and my original plan was I was going to go to grad school to become a 3D artist. But while I was in grad school, I discovered game design, and that was kind of what I realized was the thing that I had found the most passion for in all of my time working up to that point. So after I got out of grad school, then I landed my first job at a VR company, and I've been pretty much working in VR ever since then. The first VR company I worked for was the Virtuix Omni. If any of you guys have heard of them, they're the 360 treadmill that you run on the treadmill while you're wearing the headset. So they're a hardware company, so it was really strange for me being a developer working at a hardware company as the only developer there. But that's something that I would actually really recommend, because a lot of hardware companies need someone making demos for their hardware, showing how their hardware works, and a lot of times they don't even realize that they need a developer on their team. So if you know of any local companies that are developing hardware, I would encourage you guys to look into that as a possible first job in the industry, because they don't really know exactly what they're looking for, exactly what they need, and so you can end up having a lot of flexibility and a lot of creative freedom to make things that you're already interested in doing and just use that to explore their hardware.
Probably what got me involved in game development the first time around was when I was teaching in the middle of nowhere, Texas. I wanted to be a vendor once upon a time, and so when that dream didn't exactly pan out, I was considering one of two potential options. I was going to get back into teaching at the collegiate level, teaching something like college level music theory, or I was going to do game audio. And so I took a few undergraduate courses in music composition at my previous alma mater, UT Arlington, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And after that, I applied to grad school in a number of places, finally got a yes out of Texas State down in San Marcos. And because of the work situation I was in at the time, moved down here to Austin, went to grad school. Right before getting the degree, though, I first started finding out about game jams. I didn't have a clue in the world game jams were. They basically, long story short, there's simple weekend events, usually weekends, give or take. You team up with a bunch of people and you make a game from scratch, and it's definitely a major learning experience. Like the very first game jam I actually did was probably about four and a half years ago, and I was working with some students in EGaDS actually, right here in this building, and that's when this building I think was first built or was just incredibly new. So it was an awesome experience to kind of chat with people that I didn't even know about, and I had no clue what was going on as far as like what other colleges were doing as far as like game development stuff was concerned, because there really wasn't a whole lot of anything down in Texas State. But obviously being here for some of that for that particular game jam, I think it was like the South by Southwest game jam like 4 years ago, and that's what kind of got me involved with that. And once I started doing that, I started working on game jams constantly over the last, say, 4.5, almost 5 years now. Continuing to refine my craft and to accelerate my workflow and really not only do stuff with music composition, but also with sound design and a little bit of implementation kind of here and there. Learning some of those skills of like not only understanding my my software, not only understanding my digital audio workstation, but also developing that workflow for like sound design, going and recording sounds, putting those sounds in, that kind of thing, and being able to also work with the people on your team. That's a whole other skill in and of itself, being able to get along with those people and to be able to work together to make something happen there. So the game jams definitely helped with that, and then going on to a lot of the networking events. They usually happen typically once a month, and there are for sure a number of them simply because this is Austin. Austin is a huge place for game development. There are always a number of different networking events, whether you can find them through Facebook or through meetup.com. Any of those places are viable as far as finding those meetups are concerned, going to them, chatting with them about what they do, showing interest in stuff that they're doing, and working on that kind of work to kind of show that that you got something for sure to bring to the table to that.
So I essentially got into the business through sheer dumb luck and following random opportunities. I originally wanted to go to UT to be a film, like a screenwriter. And then when I was there, I moved around from like, directing, blah, 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 animation and stuff. And then I was introduced to the immersive media program through the UT 3D and RTF, and it sounded cool. VR was an interesting thing that I'd never heard about before, and I have no programming experience, very limited, like really any animation, 3D, anything. But I'm pretty good at business, and I'm pretty good at UI design and stuff. And so I just went into it, and I met a lot of really awesome people, and essentially met my business partner that, like, you know, we kind of started working together and stuff, and it just sort of grew and grew and grew. We got opportunities from people I knew that, like, I went to classes with and stuff, and then from there went to marketing events and stuff, and eventually just ended up with a company. And I basically, you know, started doing the business side of it because there's a lot of people in the VR industry that I've noticed are either startup people who have no idea what they're doing, and sort of the artistic people who have no idea what they're doing. And so being kind of a bridge between the two is actually, you know, it's definitely helped me out a lot. And yeah, and you know, the events are really helpful and stuff, and then it's a great way to meet people. Yeah, meeting people, like taking on every single opportunity that I could and just saying yes to everything. And you know, just generally like making connections and stuff, especially here in school. It's been absolutely phenomenal, and just, you know, definitely helped me get where I am.
That's definitely one of the reasons you guys should apply to BCA, make those connections.
So I graduated here with physics, and so my first job had nothing to do with physics. I was a web developer. And then I wanted to try to pivot into games, and I saw an opening for like a QA position at a small indie studio, so I did that. So I worked 2 jobs for a little bit, and then that opened up an opportunity where it made me more qualified, I guess, for doing like a test automation role at BioWare, and so I did that. So it's like sort of programming, sort of QA, and that's where I met like a lot of people that I still know today in the industry, because that studio is massive, and it was like my main opportunity, I guess, that I got out of it was like I learned like how the industry worked. I figured out whether or not I wanted to do this, because I was trying to like figure out my way into the games industry, and met a lot of people there who helped like guide me, things I need to learn and things like that. And then I went back to school and pivoted in that direction. Yeah, and then went to GDC and actually got some interviews on the spot there.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's like how I got my job at Cloud Aquarium, and I worked as a physics engine programmer there for a while, and that's, 4 years ago, and yeah.
I forgot to mention that a lot of interviews happen at GDC.
Yes.
So apply to BCA.
Yep. I was also a CA.
Yeah, Andrew's also a CA.
Yeah,
So.
and I heard about it through a coworker at BioWare who told me about it. It was Johnny. Yeah.
That's great. So yeah, apply to BCA. So looking out at a bunch of college students right now, and I guess we have one college student as well, so you're like in the process of everything as well.
Look inward at the college students.
Yeah. Look inside yourself. What would you say is a major do and a major don't? Something that you would recommend trying to do at this stage, and something you would recommend not worrying about, not fretting over? And it doesn't have to be like in order. It can be.
Probably the first thing I would definitely do is, as while you're still in college or whatever, is definitely working on something as far as any type of game that you're working on, whether it's by yourself or with other classmates or other friends from from school. Working on something and getting it finished and out there that is separate from your classwork. Having something that is not tied to like a capstone project or not something that you did for a class or anything like that. Being able to have something that is either in progress or that is either finished or at least in progress that you and your friends are working on, or if you're by yourself, that's fine too. Shows other people that might want to hire you for sure later on down the road that you are self-driven, that you are able to that you're showing your proficiencies in the software that you know. And that you are not being, told by someone else, like a professor or something like that, how to or what to do as far as like this particular project is concerned. Being able to work on those things on your own will definitely put you that much further ahead of the game as far as your hireability is concerned. When you do get to a point where you're around other people who are in the industry and stuff like that, it's definitely critical to when you're talking with them and stuff like that, don't go in there with a mindset of I need a job and the only thing I can talk about is needing a job or getting a job or stuff like that. Because chances are a lot of industry veterans can probably smell that from a mile away, and you don't want to exude those vibes. It's essentially critical to make sure that you are interested in the people that you're around, like those industry veterans, and that you are interested in the work that they are doing. When you show those things first, that's when, you know, they will reciprocate that interest in you and figure out where you're at in everything. And if you get around to showing them, like, hey, here's this thing that me and some of my friends have been working on, and also emphasizing the fact that it's like not tied to any classwork and not tied to any capital project, will definitely help with getting your name out there and eventually finding your way into the industry, even at a junior level. That would be perfectly fine as far as being able to fully be able to break in is concerned.
So, I have a lot of don'ts. The one do is very specific, not really like advice or anything, is if you want to go into VR, definitely learn Unreal, because that gives you a head up on literally everyone else. My first don't is don't assume that the people that you're going to that have money and that are older than you and that have graduated and stuff know more than you, because oftentimes, especially if they aren't like startup people who come into the industry, they don't know what they're doing. And assuming that sort of I guess like that you guys aren't on the same plane kind of puts you at a disadvantage, and it allows them to sort of try to take control sort of, and it sort of creates kind of the wrong relationship. You don't want them to look down on you. You don't want them to like potentially take advantage of you or anything like that. And the other don't is don't worry about like resumes and like official like, you know, like applying for jobs through websites and stuff like that. I know so many people who are graduating and they're like, oh my God, I can't find a job. I'm applying for all these jobs at all of these companies and no one's even answering my emails or anything like that. And I've never had that problem because I just go to events and I just meet people and I talk to them and opportunities open up, and you know, just like whenever you sort of don't get stuck into the mindset of, oh well, this is how it works, therefore I should do this. Because the way that sort of like, especially Austin being such a big sort of startup sort of industry, like, or hub and everything, if you think about things in a slightly different way, then you'll probably be able to find what you want to do, and if there isn't a job, then make the job, you know? Because people are probably looking for that, and no one knows that that's even a potential, so they don't go into it. So, yeah, essentially that.
I would say for like your dues, like there probably won't ever be a time where you have more flexible time ever again. So like this is like the best time to like work on, like definitely dive into a personal project, at least one, something like you get really into and show off, and then also work with other people and like finish some games. And it's like those are two important things. It's like personal, like whether you're artist, like art portfolio pieces, and then build assets for a game. If you're a programmer, do some really cool tech demo and work on a project and make a game. But just like finish some of these things. Yeah, I don't have too many don'ts. I mean, like, yeah, you guys pretty much covered most of it. Like, I mean, game jams are really good. It like, especially if you don't want to like self-discipline yourself to like finish something. A game jam is such a tight time constraint. You'll probably finish something in that weekend, and that's even worth showing off. And then also like network. You know, go to these events, meet people. That's like the easiest way. You can apply through those websites and whatever, and it sometimes works. But the best way is just to meet someone you can physically just. Them just tell you, hey, just email me your resume. That's probably the best way. And because of that's really important, I guess one major don't is in these conversations, don't randomly shit talk games. Like, I see people do it all the time, where they're like talking to someone and they'll just like, you know, shit talk Call of Duty or whatever, and it's like, you know, 5 years ago I worked on that thing, you know? It's a real easy way to burn bridges up front, so yeah. Don't do that.
So For my two that I would suggest, it goes kind of along with a lot of what they were saying, but along the lines of doing a project outside of school, I would suggest finding an internship while you're still in school. And it's really difficult actually to find internships in Austin. A lot of the game studios in Austin want to hire people who already have experience. They don't want to hire people with no experience, so it's difficult. But it is possible, and I think it kind of, if you're able to get an internship before you graduate, it'll really set you apart from the other people you'd be competing with for jobs. And when I was in college, I was given what I consider now to be possibly bad advice, but it was given with really good intentions. I was in a computer science program, and they told us all, don't take any unpaid internships, only take paid internships. And they told us that because they were trying to change the mindsets of companies who are taking advantage of unpaid interns. But as a result of that, I ended up not doing an internship at all because I couldn't find any paid internships. So I didn't do an internship when I was in college. And looking back, I do actually regret that. I think it would have helped me if I had taken an unpaid internship while I was still in school. But the one thing that I would caution, so here's my don't. If you do take an unpaid internship, don't let them take advantage of you because they will try to. So there are laws about how you can do unpaid internships. As a company doing an unpaid internship, you have to make sure that the student has the ability to get college credit for it, and you have to make sure that you are not profiting from any of their work. So if you take an unpaid internship, ensure that they understand the laws around having an unpaid internship. They are not allowed to profit from anything that you make. If you make something, they can't actually put it in something that they're shipping unless they pay you some amount to purchase that work. What they can do is, if you make something and they like it, they can buy that art asset or that script from you and pay you for that, as opposed to paying you as like an hourly employee. So there are good ways to do unpaid internships, but do be careful about that. If you have an opportunity to get a paid internship, absolutely take that route. It's definitely preferable. But I think having an internship before you graduate makes a big difference of whether or not you're able to get a job right after graduating. I know a lot of people, I teach up at the Art Institute, and I've seen a lot of students, if they graduate without an internship, then what happens is it's 6 or 8 months or a year after they graduate before they get their first job. Because they need that time after they graduate to build up enough experience. They have to then work on projects outside of class or take an unpaid internship after they've graduated, and you don't want to do something like that. So, yeah, so do an internship while you're still in school. And then I did have one other don't. Oh yeah, don't make a bad impression in any of your classes, because you might be surprised how many people in the industry your teachers know. And so if you make a good impression in your class and you show that you're a dedicated and hard worker, you might be surprised that one of your teachers actually knows someone they can put you in contact with to get you a job after graduating. As I said, I teach up at the Art Institute, but I also run a studio, so I know a lot of other people who run studios, and so the students who do really well in my classes, I make sure they have somewhere to go after they graduate. So never underestimate the power of making good connections, and you might be surprised where you find them at.
Yeah, actually, one more thing. That's actually a good example of that is my professor, or former professor, Deepak Chetty, who runs the Immersive Media program. We just finished a project in conjunction with his company, because he worked really, really hard to find us a job, because he really wanted to work with us, because he was so impressed by what we did in his class. And it's actually going to be a virtual lab in the Austin Public Library, and so that's going to be in there soon.
That's cool. Does anybody have any questions they are burning to ask? Yes.
Yeah, so what are the challenges of funding an independent studio, like a small studio? What are the challenges that are unique to that compared to funding like a local studio in general?
Well, so I would say if you're intending on starting your own studio, you should go into that intending on funding it yourself, because the chances of finding external funding are pretty low, especially when you're just getting started. So a lot of the classmates I had when I graduated, a lot of them went on to start their own studios right away, and it was really difficult for them to start right away because they were starting with nothing. And so my approach to it was I went and worked full-time for 2-3 years before I started my studio, so I had saved up enough money that I could fund my studio myself. And that really is the easiest and safest way to do it, is make sure you have enough money to run your studio in advance. for at least a few months until you can get funding from somewhere else, because funding doesn't just fall out of the sky for the most part, as much as we wish it would, and finding that is really hard.
What would you say would be like an appropriate level of risk to take if you wanted to go that route, like save up some money and then try to start a studio of your own? Like, what would realistically, like, how many people would you want to like try to get on board, or would you want to do something by yourself, or would you want to?
So the easiest thing to, sorry, I don't mean to monopolize the conversation, but I did all this relatively recently, within the last couple of years. Ideally, if you're trying to start something on your own, you probably also have friends who are interested in the same things that you are, and they'll probably work a lot cheaper if they can work with you than if they were, trying to land a full-time job. So I happen to have a couple of friends who were willing to work for practically nothing, and we all just got started not paying ourselves anything, and we released a couple of games. We actually released them for free, so we weren't even planning on making money off of it. We were just trying to make a name. So that really helped me with getting my studio. I think I was having friends that also had the same vision. But if you wanted to be able to actually hire contractors, there are actually a lot of possibilities for doing that. There's a lot of sites online to help connect people from different disciplines. So if you're a programmer and you need to find an artist and a sound designer, there's sites like Upwork that you can use to network and find people of other disciplines. Unity Connect is also a great way to do that. But yeah, so realistically, it's hard to say. It's hard to put a number value on it. You'd have to do a fair amount of research and look at what roles do you need to hire people for, and how much time do you think you would need to pay them for. That's the really big thing. Most contractors work hourly, so do you need 10 hours of artwork, or do you need 1,000 hours of artwork, right? So that makes a huge difference in how much money you would need to get it.
Would you recommend taking on multiple games throughout the duration, like as long as the money lasts, like you did, or if you were to go back, would you just do one big project?
I'm pretty happy with the way that it turned out doing a lot of small projects. I think that if I had done one large project, I would have, at this point, I'd have one large title shipped by my studio as opposed to 4 or 5 small titles, which it's hard to say. I don't know. I honestly don't know if I would be happier having one large title or just 4 or 5 small ones.
To piggyback on the idea of having different types of agreements with people from other disciplines that you're contracting out, there are ways for the person who's doing the hiring. There are ways to kind of save money on your end by allowing those particular contractors to retain rights and stuff like that. There are ways that you can use that as a method of saving money on your end. Yes, they would keep the rights to those kind of things, but you could also have certain licenses for you to be able to use their work for X amount of time or something like that. And there's ways to kind of have a lot of different ideas as far as contracts are concerned, so that regardless of what your budget is, there's something that you and the people that you're contracting can agree on, so that you can get your money's worth out of those awesome people that you're working with, and that they feel that that they're getting paid fairly for the amount of work that they're doing and everything like that.
Another option is we haven't released any games right now because we are currently in sort of the process of making enough money so that we could stop working and actually start focusing on games and stuff. But one thing that I would notice that if you start sort of a company and you start working for other people who do things not necessarily not games, but game related, gamified apps or whatever, what's really cool is you're kind of it's sort of like 2 birds with 1 stone, where you're learning while you're also making money. And so, you actually, every single project that we take on, every single thing, the client comes to us and is like, I want you to do that. And it's well, that's interesting. We haven't done that before, so then we have to learn and figure it out and stuff. And then pretty shortly, we're sort of on the side developing a couple of games. And so then we go back to the games and it's oh wow, this actually solves one of the problems that we couldn't figure out and stuff. And so it takes a balance if you want to do, if you want to work while also developing games at the same time. But sometimes it can be beneficial, but you just have to figure out if you want to prioritize, making money and working on other people's things, or working on your own game. And if you want to completely prioritize like the game, then you should make the money before and then go into the development. But otherwise, you can do both at the same time.
As far as anything else like funding related is concerned, I hesitate slightly to bring this up, but I'll go ahead and get this idea out there anyhow. Kickstarter can be a viable option. Kickstarter, Indiegogo, like crowdfunding type campaigns. It's possible to get funding through that, but you have to do a crazy amount of research beforehand, and you have to be able to make sure that you and the people that are on your team are going to be able to generate a lot of hype and enough hype of this particular project, so you can, when day one of that crowdfunding campaign launches, that snowball can immediately start rolling down the hill as far as your funding is concerned. You can talk to a lot of friends, family members, coworkers, anybody and everybody that you know that you have access to that would like to see this kind of game being made. You know, you let them know way before even day one of your crowdfunding campaign launches. Like, hey, day one of that is this. We'd really appreciate it if you contributed to the campaign on that specific day. Because typically what happens is when you're scrolling through some of those Kickstarter or Indiegogo crowdfunding campaigns, typically the people who are more willing to give money towards that are the people that see that it's the people that are more willing to put money into those campaigns are like leaning more towards like those campaigns that it looks like it's going to get funded, so I'll throw a little extra money in and can just kind of push it the rest of the way down the hill. If there's like 3 days left and it's only gotten maybe 5% of your total goals, then chances are people aren't going to throw money at it. And so having that critical day one hype, and then also on top of that, you know, if you say that you're going to be offering X number of awards for the different tiers of your crowdfunding, it is very critical that you follow up on that and you make 100% sure that you do everything in your power to make sure that those backers get those rewards when you say that you're getting it to them. And talking with other people that have done similar crowdfunding campaigns before will definitely help you to see like what works, what doesn't work, what mistakes did they make that I can learn from, that kind of thing.
Any other questions?
Speaking of
Oh,
that, so my studio was actually a Kickstarter studio, and yeah, like everything you said, like it's a lot of the Kickstarters that fail is they don't do enough prep, like months of like marketing beforehand, like trying to contact like find like writers from different online sites that cover your genre and tell them about it, send them demo, whatever, send them press package, and like get them to talk about it. Like you have to get people to talk about it and get people that will talk about it and fund it, tell them about the day that it's going to launch, like tons of marketing beforehand, and you pretty much want to be funded or close to it within the first like 3 days. Otherwise, you're pretty much going to fail on that. That's just how it turns out. It's like it's always the uptick at the beginning and then the uptick at the end. Everything else is just a lull. And you only get the uptick at the end if it's close or if there's enough hype. And people talk about how it's almost over kind of deal. And it's pretty much like a steady drumbeat, like every single day of the campaign. You keep talking about it and keep talking to like people online to get them to talk about it more. But leading up to that, like I wasn't there from the very beginning. I was there during the Kickstarter, but like to start up the studio is just self-funded. You just need to save enough money to have enough of a runway for yourself and your co-founders to prep it all, build up the demo, get the marketing stuff all ready. And then our game was like a little bit, it's a larger budget for an indie game. So after the Kickstarter, the next phase is like, here's the scope of the game we wanted to make. Here's how much money we have for the Kickstarter, which was a lot. It was like 850,000 or so, but we needed more, right? So that was enough to guarantee some runway. So there was a scoped game that could fit within that budget, but we wanted to do more. So then we had whoever is in charge of business, our main business guy, prep like a pitch deck and everything like that, and because now there's like a proof of concept. So it really helped that the Kickstarter was successful because now there's a proof of demand. But then yeah, you can always pitch. Kickstarter is like scarier these days. It seems like it's less successful these days. So you could go the route of immediately pitching. There's a lot of publishers that specialize in funding indie games and with smaller budgets. So you can pitch off the bat, or you can try crowdfunding and then pitching, or some combination of it. But yeah, like legitimately just reaching out, finding these publishers and their contacts, and then pitching to them. It's as simple as like emailing an executive at one of these with your pitch deck, an email, and like a website with your proposal, and then try to get them to email you back and set up a meeting. So yeah, those are main ways of funding.
Yes.
I have two questions. I got in a little bit late. Are all of you VR developers?
I am not.
I have a question on sort of what the day-to-day responsibilities look like on being a VR developer. Is there anything different in VR compared to just general game development?
Well, that is, I'm not really sure. Not really. You have to have the hardware and stuff, and so a lot of it involves, you know, like having a vibe in the room, or having the headsets and charging phones and making sure all the hardware is good. But
Yeah, so the biggest difference is the hardware basically, but that's true for anything you work on besides PC. So if you were a mobile developer, being able to continuously test on the mobile devices that you're distributing on is vital. Basically the only time that's not the case is if you're developing for PC, because you're literally working on the thing that you're developing for. So if you were developing for a console, you might do a big chunk of the work and then go through a long testing phase, making sure that it actually runs well on that console. And so similarly with VR, you can do a fair amount of the work without having the headset on, but you're going to have to make a lot of changes once you put the headset on and see how things work. Because things that you expect to work won't necessarily work once you have the headset hooked up. In my experience, working in VR is a little bit more risky because of the fact that the industry has like a perception of not being very stable at this point, because the headsets are still pretty new and they're changing really fast. I got started with the DK1, and when we went from the DK1 to the DK2, it was like the nightmare phase. Like if you talk to anyone who was